Comics are made by creative people, and creative people are creative and usually given a lot of license to say and do things that are different. But where does that start and stop exactly? Hey there, this is Perch. This feels like a video that I think could be really powerful if I took the time to really kind of outline it and put in some homework and write a script and do it right. But I'm lazy, so I won't be doing any of those things. But it's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I've approached this topic a few times before, kind of in different ways, kind of more quiet, more subtle ways. Which is to say, I feel like comics as an industry, much like movies, much like writers, not journalism, but people who are writers, they tend to enjoy more creative freedom, and that's a good thing. I mean, well, it's not as a good thing or bad thing. It's kind of a required thing. I think if you're going to do a creative job, you have to be able to look at the world creatively and do things differently. I think that's kind of a it's a requirement of entry. Put it this way: if your job is to lay concrete, your job is to make streets, right? So you're gonna put the I don't know how streets are made, but you're gonna put the stuff on the road and you're gonna roll it with one of those giant things with the big wheels. If you're there, you go. Here's my knowledge of construction and road work right there on the table. Anyway, if you're going to do those things, um, then you can't really be creative with that job. I mean, a road needs to be straight, cars need to drive on it, it needs to be flat. You can't just randomly decide to, throw a pretty rock into the middle of the road because, you want to have it look different. I mean, you've got a job that's a very defined job. And in some cases, making comic books or doing creative work has the same kind of requirements. Like, you know, generally speaking, you need to be on time. Now, unless you're doomsday clock. I know I'm joking, but generally speaking, you need to meet a schedule. Generally speaking, you have to, you know, submit your work in a certain format. I mean, there's a lot of like requirements about that, but your personality can be different. You don't have to punch a clock at nine and punch out at 5. You have a lot of creativity about your day. You're a creative person, so you can kind of manage and run your day the way you want to, and that's fine. And that's again, that's kind of required. But the challenge is that with structure comes predictability. Let's say people who have to go to a job and have to be precise with their time tend to be less erratic. They tend to do less crazy things, or maybe you just don't notice it, and then one day violence or something horrible erupts because the person kind of snaps. But in the creative field, it's not like that. In the creative field, you have a lot more freedom to kind of you know do and say and manage things like you want. And that can be anything like you wake up, you don't feel like writing today, you feel like going to the park, so you just go to the park and you have a nice day out in the park. You wake up and you get a bunch of writing done at 4 in the morning, and then by 7 in the morning you go and you just eat a bunch of pancakes and get stoned all day. I mean, you can do anything in that creative space, because your day is your own. If you don't produce, then you don't get money and you get fired. But it's not like you have the same kind of requirements and rigid kind of environment that other jobs have. And so that's one reason why, if you just kind of take a big picture look at it, a lot of people might want to be creative. A lot of people might want to have a creative position like a writer, an artist, or other things, but they're not built for it. Some people need structure. I'm firmly of the belief, and I've had arguments with this with other people, that there are some personality types, whether it's environmental or genetic or born or whatever, you grow up into an adult and you require structure. You require kind of 9 to 5 hours. You need to punch a clock, because if you don't, you just kind of wander aimlessly. And other people, especially very successful creatives, know how to juggle that time and know how to kind of turn this freedom into a paycheck. And I think that's, so I say all this as kind of a preamble to, that's what comics are about. They're created by these types of people: writers, artists, colorists, and on it goes. Now, the comic business has, time card punching people in terms of, hopefully the marketing, the distributor, the editors. Those kinds of people have a little bit more rigidness to their day. They may work in an actual office. They have certain elements that are just kind of requirements. And so again, this is how the world works. It's not, what I'm saying isn't necessarily controversial or subject to opinion. It's fact. There are some jobs that require more structure than other jobs. The opinion piece are there some people that require more structure than others? And I would say there are. But so with all that said, when we look at kind of then some of the behavior and antics and stuff that the creative people get up to, is it really that surprising? Because again, you have somebody who doesn't have those same kind of rules, doesn't have that same kind of need to conform, and so they are able to kind of run their day the way they want, say what they want, kind of be whatever they want. And we give typically creative people, you think about movies and Hollywood for a moment, we give them a lot more license to say random stuff. If you were like the guy who was the chief financial officer at Staples, typically speaking, that guy wouldn't go out and give an interview about, how the president is hiding knowledge of aliens in Area 51 and cocaine should be legal. If that person did that, they would probably be fired, and they would cause the stock to tumble and so on of the company. But if, say, a movie director does that, if Quentin Tarantino were to stand up and do that, everybody would be like, you wacky guy. Yeah, that's Tarantino. I can't wait for his next film. So we give people a lot more license to say and do crazy stuff when they're in the creative field. Okay, that makes sense, right? So, and then I think on top of that, one more element is that you now have social networks, you have social media, which allows you to say that crazy thought immediately. You don't have to wait. You don't have to find a camera. You don't have to get interviewed. You can immediately say something crazy. And now, if you think about comics in relation to movies, comics has so less money and importance to it than movies, and and some of these other fields. So there's even less of a requirement to really be on your game to say, normal, not crazy things. And so I think all this adds up to a pretty interesting kind of dynamic where I think at times we expect people who are in comics, who are writing comics or drawing comics, we expect them to say and do and behave, if you will, in a certain way. And maybe that's just fundamentally unfair because, they're not, they're not the time card 9 to 5 working people. They are people who are more creative by nature and say and do weird things. So now to kind of put a point on it, when, on social media, a bunch of fans react to, Saad Ahmad or Mark Wade or Gail Simone or I'll just throw all the people with their different opinions. Ethan Van Sciver, very different personalities, but they'll say things and do things, and people are like, "Hey, that's unprofessional. That's not, that's not being a good consumer." What's funny is I'll get downvoted because I put Ethan's name in with some of those other people. Hopefully, before you're rushing to, like Pavlovian bell, rushing to do that downvote, think about what I'm saying here is that all of these individuals will say things like "F off, dude," which I think every single person I've mentioned has done at one point or another in social media. And I'm not comparing. I'm not saying they're all the same person. I'm not saying that there's not different degrees. I'm saying that if you're in the creative field, you have license to say and do those things. Whereas if you're an office worker, you do not. The description that sometimes has been given to people in the comics field has been, if you're what's the expression? If you're in comics, you're a hot dog vendor, because you should be paying attention to what your customers want. Okay, so I agree with that sentiment to a point. I absolutely do. I think that if you are in any kind of business, you need to be responsive to customers. You need to have guest and customer satisfaction on your mind. That is key to not only selling your book, but it's keeping you employed. It's what you're supposed to do. And I do think it's a good reminder. I don't remember. I think it's the Richard Meyer who coined that phrase, and I think that the truth part of what he's saying there is that it's very easy for people in a creative field, for people who are in more of this kind of industry, like comics, like movies, like TV shows. It's a lot easier to start to ignore or forget that there are customers at all. When you're creative, suddenly you start to give yourself license of, I can say and do kind of whatever I want because my creativity trumps, no pun intended, all of these other things. My creativity, my need to express myself, my need to be kind of on point, if you will, with whatever I have in my mind. That's the important thing, not customer service. And there's a bunch of people who think and behave that way. And famously, if we want to kind of help comics make sense for ourselves, we just need to take a look at its cousin, the movies. It's grown up, far more wealthy and successful cousin, the movie industry, where you see actors. I mean, look, Gwyneth Paltrow is a good example of somebody who, if you look at her interviews and you listen to her, she is completely off her nut. But she brings enough to the table in movies. There's enough of a draw to her name. She's, for whatever reason, either people like the way she acts, or they like the way she looks, or she's just kind of enough of a celebrity that, and her comments are innocuous enough that they don't make anyone really crazy. So people put up with Gwyneth Paltrow, and she gets jobs. And so Gwyneth Paltrow has, effectively succeeded in, I can be fairly crazy and still keep my job. In comics, there's not enough money for people to be truly crazy and keep their job, or they're not making enough money in the first place, in which case there's nobody cares enough to tell them, hey, change your attitude. So I may have lost a bunch of people here. I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, we need to hold people to a standard, because I do think that, the comics are serious business and they should matter, and we should be customer focused, and we should be taking our jobs and our roles seriously. And there's a lot of people who care about this IP that has been created, and comics matter. Yes. At the same time, though, we shouldn't act surprised or bewildered when some of the people working in comics do crazy stuff. Because in an industry that's built and based around creatives, people are going to naturally be creative, and that's going to lead to what we have. Does this make any sense? I mean, leave some comments below. I'm trying to kind of talk through this issue, and I know it's rambly, and I know I've kind of gone all over the place with it. But I guess the point is, we've got to find a good balance between expecting professionalism, expecting that there is kind of a nice, tight, organized way of doing things, and also recognizing that some of the DNA of the people we're talking about are not built to conform to very rigid standards. They're just not. Now and frankly, there's very, very few people who can hang their hat upon the fact that they were pretty, very non-controversial 9 to 5 guy. I mean, I think a good example, I guess, of somebody who's just does their job and pretty much, you never worry about is Mark Bagley. I think is a guy who I consistently hear of just the most steady guy in the world, so to speak, just gets his stuff done. But everyone from the big guys to the little guys to the independents to the crowdfunders to the big publishers, I mean, everybody's had these kind of wacky moments in social media and or in life or in cons or wherever, that again, if you were the chief digital officer or a vice president of marketing at Bank of America, you would be there's no way you could do any of this because it's a different type of job. Does that make sense? I don't know. Leave me a comment. What do you think? Did I lose people here, or what? Does this make sense? I think that there's I think that part of having a healthier, happier kind of relationship and life with comics is when you can kind of learn to change the things you can change, accept the things you can't change, and be more in balance with the whole industry. And sometimes I see some of the chaos around kind of creative behavior is like, well, is it how crazy is this? Is it truly crazy? Is it Gwyneth Paltrow crazy, or is it oh is it Woody Allen crazy? Like what's the level of crazy we're really talking about here? Because it there's a lot of different things that go on in any given minute, and some of it is not as big a deal as I think sometimes we make it out to be, and sometimes it is. For example, creator sending a naked picture of his butt to another creator on social media where everybody can see it. Yeah, not that's crazy behavior. That's more than Gwyneth Paltrow behavior, unless Gwyneth Paltrow is sending pictures of her butt to people, in which case, I think I'd have heard about it. But maybe it's just me. Leave me a comment below. What do you think? Am I onto something? Am I crazy? Tell me I'm crazy. It's okay. A lot of my brain's not creative, clearly, because what am I saying? Hey, if you like this video, and I don't know how you possibly could have, like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Tell a friend. Don't point them to this video though. God knows. And thanks for listening.